Okay, so we are on to the next unit. The next unit. Oh. So today's the 13th. This one is all about dividing a polynomial by a binomial. Okay. So we're going to have steps to do this, followed by an example. Alright, so your first step. Your first step is to factor the numerator and your denominator. So with x squared plus 7x minus 8 divided by x minus 1, I want you to notice that this bottom one cannot be factored anymore. When you can't factor something, it's already factored. You can't do anything. Remember, it's called prime. But this trinomial on top, that can be factored. Because remember, we talked about 4 different types of factoring. We talked, maybe 5 actually. Technically it's 4, but one of them has 2 different parts to it. So we talked about greatest common factor, where all you do is you find the greatest common factor that goes into all of your terms, and you pull that out, and then whatever's left inside, that's being factored. We talked about differences of square. Remember, it has to be a binomial. It has to be perfect square minus another perfect square for it to fall under that category. And then we talked about trinomials. The factoring trinomials, there was 2 different ways. There was one way where a equaled 1. Remember, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. If a equals 1, it's like this one where there's no leading coefficient. If in the other type we talked about was if we actually had an ax squared plus bx plus c, where a was greater than 1. So that was actually a number, whether it's from 2 and up. And the last one we talked about was factoring by grouping. So factoring by grouping, that just means you group things off, group it through the half in the middle, because it's 4 terms. That one has to be a 4-term one. And those are different methods of factoring. In this case, it's 3 terms. So if you're 2 terms, I would look at, see if you're a difference of square. If there's no subtraction, I would think maybe greatest common factor. If you're 3 terms, I would think about factoring trinomial way. If you're 4 terms, I would definitely go with factoring by grouping. There's actually no other way to do it that way. Alright, so we're going to factor the top. We're going to factor our numerator. So doing that would be the first step. Is you see this, factor the numerator. So we're not actually going to factor the numerator in here, because we're about to do it in some examples. But once you have your numerator factored, you can cancel out any common factors that's going to be in the numerator and in the denominator. So what this means is that this is actually factored out to be x minus 8 times, or x plus 8 times x minus 1. That's your new numerator, and then your denominator stays the same. It stays as x minus 1. And cancel out any common terms, any common factors. That means if it's in the top and in the bottom, they cancel each other out. So then your last step is that the remaining factor is your answer. So what did we have, like, since these two canceled each other out, that just left us with x plus 8. So that's your answer. Alright, so that's the basics of what we're going to do. Now let's look at some examples. Okay, this one is going to be number 1 from the notes, it's x squared minus 10x plus 21 divided by x minus 7. Alright, notice the bottom, you can't factor that anymore. It's a variable minus a number. They have nothing in common. But that top one is a trinomial. So I'm going to rewrite it down here, actually. Squared minus 10x plus 21. Alright, since it has a leading coefficient of 1, this one's actually pretty easy to factor. Remember, draw your x. 1 times 21 is 21. Bring down the middle term, negative 10. So 21, the factors of 21 are actually 1 and 21 and 3 and 7, that's it. But notice how this is positive, but this one's negative. Since this product number is positive, that means that you had two negatives multiplied against each other, because a negative times a negative gives you a positive, but a negative plus a negative, you would keep the sign, you would add the numbers and keep the sign. 3 and 7 are the ones that fit in here, because negative 3 times negative 7 is a positive 21, negative 3 minus 7 is a negative 10. And that is it on this one. Then you would write it x minus, so your factored form of this one is x minus 3 times x minus 7. So, hold on. I meant to write out that we were going to factor this. And then once they have this factored, then you rewrite your fraction. So we're going to rewrite this as x minus 7 times x minus 3. You could flip those two, it's the same. And then in the denominator we had x minus 7. I know it didn't have parentheses here and I put parentheses here, but that's because if I put parentheses here, I have to put those there. That's a little bit of my OCD talking right there. It makes it look neater, and then I can see that that's puts everything together. So then right here, remember, if you x minus 7 is on top, x minus 7 is on bottom. So you cancel out common factors. And then we are going to write that as x minus 3. And that's your answer. And we're just going to rewrite the remaining factor. So that is all your steps on how to do it. Factor the top, rewrite it, cancel out any common terms, any common factors, and then your remaining factor is your answer. Now looking at a difference of squares. So y squared, this is actually number 3. Y squared minus 25 divided by y plus 5. Alright, look at that. That's a binomial. Something, you can take the square root of y squared, you can take the square root of 25, and we have subtraction. Binomial, subtraction, I think of difference of squares. In this case that we write, so then you got to take the square root of y squared, which is y, and the square root of 25, which is 5. So it's going to come out in 2 sets of parentheses with y plus 5 and y minus 5. That is why they are different, because they need different signs. Rewriting the numerator is going to give you y plus 5 times y minus 5 divided by y plus 5. We have a y plus 5 on bottom, y plus 5 on top. That leaves us with y minus 5 as your answer. Oh, wait, no. Let's squeeze number 4 in here. Oh, yes. So number 4 is 2r squared plus 16r divided by r plus 8. Alright, this one's another trinomial. No, this is not a trinomial. This is a binomial with addition. So we have difference of squares for binomial with subtraction. We have the trinomial methods, both ones with 3 terms. We have factoring by grouping with 4 terms. Anything else that does not fall into, if anything doesn't fall in that category, I would go with greatest common factor. So finding the greatest common factor in this one. What does 2r squared and 16r have in common? So always go with the smaller number. In this case it's 2. Does 2 go into 16? Yes, that's your greatest common factor. Remember, you want the greatest number. Variables, remember that works differently. That is an r to the first power. They both have an r, but you can't say r squared because this one doesn't have an r squared, but they both have an r to the first power. And when you do find the greatest common factor, you need to take each term and divide it by the greatest common factor. 2, that's actually r to the first. 16r divided by 2r, that's r, that's 8. So then your answer would be your greatest common factor times what you had remaining, which was r plus 8. So then rewriting this, you would get 2r times r plus 8 divided by r plus 8. And then you have r plus 8 on top, r plus 8 on bottom, which leaves you with 2r left. So it's not going to be exactly 2 terms as your answer. It can just be this one term by itself, just like this. Alright, flipping over to the back. I actually don't want this one. I didn't want this page to get messed up. Okay. Sorry, when you flip over a piece of paper with pencil, it marks onto the paper behind it. Okay. Number 9. I'm just kind of trying to, or number 5. I'm trying to do a little bit of each. Alright, number 5 is 2n squared plus 5n minus 12 divided by 2n minus 3. Alright, this is a 2, 5, 12. We have 2 evens and an odd. There's nothing that they have in common in here. Okay, we're good to go. It's trinomial with a greater than 1. Alright, so we have to factor that trinomial. 2 times a negative 12 is a negative 24. Bring down the positive 5. So we need, since that 24 is negative, that means we need 2 numbers that multiply to give you a negative 4. Or a negative 24. To get a negative 24, you need 1 positive, 1 negative. Since that 5 is positive, that means that your bigger number is going to be positive and your smaller number is going to be negative. So then, looking at the factors of 24, we have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. That's it. So since we have to take the difference of these numbers, we'll have 1 positive, 1 minus, 1 negative, so we need the difference. The difference of 24 and 1 is 23, but we need 5. The difference of 12 and 2 is 10. The difference of 8 and 3 is 5. That's the one you want, with the 8 behind the positive, the 3 behind the negative. Alright, now drawing your box. Remember, the first term goes in the top left corner. The last term goes in the bottom right corner. Then in these two corners, you can put negative 3n or positive 8n. You could have flipped those either way. Alright, now looking at the left column, the only thing that they have in common here is a 1n. Because 2 and 3, they only have 1 in common. Looking at your right column, 8 does not go into 12, but 4, which is the next biggest factor of 8, does go into 8 and 4 and 12, so that'd be a 4. These two boxes are positive, so everything touching those have to be positive. 2 does go into 8, so this one's going to factor 2n. And then negative 3 does go into a negative 12. And since this box is negative, you have to factor out a negative. So then this leaves you with 2n minus 3 times n plus 4. So then you can rewrite your numerator to be 2n minus 3 times n plus 4 over 2n minus 3. Cancel out the top, cancel out the bottom. That leaves you with n plus 4. There you go. Okay, another way that you could have written this is number 9. It says c squared plus 8c minus 33 divided by c minus 3. This is actually the same. This is actually the same one on top and bottom. This is the same as the top because it's, remember this line across right here just means division, so it's the top divided by the bottom. It's the top divided by the bottom. If you feel more comfortable, you can always rewrite this as c squared plus 8c minus 33 divided by c minus 3. And then this is a simple, easy trinomial one where you just take the top, c squared minus plus 8c minus 33, negative 33, a positive 8. Two numbers that give you that is actually going to be a positive 11 and a negative 3. So then rewriting our fraction, that would be c plus 11 times c minus 3 divided by c minus 3. Cancel out. That leaves you with c plus 11. And then two more examples and it will be done. Number 12. It says 2d squared minus 4d minus 7d divided by d plus 5. Alright. Ooh. Whew. I want you to notice, this is a trinomial. It does have a term greater than 1 in the front, but all of these are even. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, 2 goes into 70 35 times. So if you factor out a 2 at the beginning, that leaves you with d squared minus 2d minus 35. And bam, you just went from having to take a whole extra step, because from here you have negative 35 and 2. The factors of 35 are 1 and 35 and 5 and 7. Since 2 is negative, then the 7 has to be negative. So then, because we factored out a 2, 2 has to go in front of your answer. We have d plus 5 times d minus 7. So rewriting your numerator, you would put your factored form of your trinomial divided by, we were dividing by d plus 5. We have a d plus 5 on top, we have a d plus 5 on bottom. That leaves us with 2 times d minus 7, and you leave it just like that. Alright, and the last kind of problem that we're going to talk about is actually factoring by grouping. So we have x cubed minus x squared y minus 6x plus 6y divided by x minus y. Alright, I'm going to rewrite the numerator x cubed minus x squared y minus 6x plus 6y. We have 4 terms. Split it down the middle. Split it right after the second term and right before the sign of the third term. Alright, on the left side of this line, we have x cubed minus x squared y. Only the right one has a y, the left one does not, but they both have an x squared in common. So x cubed divided by x squared would give you, remember that's x to the 3 minus 2, which is just x. And then x squared y divided by x squared squared on top, x squared on bottom would leave you with a y. Bring down your subtraction. The only time you don't bring down the sign from above is whenever you divide by a negative number. In this case, we divided by a positive number, so we're going to keep the subtraction. On the left side, we have negative right here, so we're going to subtract a negative out. We have a 6 and a 6, so they both have a 6 in common. The left has a x, the right has a y. That's it. Then taking negative 6x divided by negative 6, well, the negatives cancel, the 6 cancel. That leaves you with an x. And then a positive 6y divided by negative 6. The 6 just cancels, but this is a positive divided by a negative, which is another negative, and then bring down the y. So we had x minus y. So remember, this is going to be in one set of parentheses, we're going to have what we factored out, x squared minus 6. And in the other set, we're going to have that x minus y, which you can see in both right here and here. So then rewriting this fraction, we're going to have x squared minus 6 times x minus y over x minus y. Well, then the x minus y's cancel, and that leaves you with x squared minus 6 as your answer. And that's it.